This happened when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old. I was invited to a friend's birthday party, and there was about 10 other kids there. It was a friend named Tony, and he was not my best friend, but I knew him pretty well. I also knew just about everybody else at his birthday party. The party itself was at Tony's house, which was maybe 5 minutes away from mine. It was a really populated neighborhood with lots of houses. I remember that the party was both inside and outside, because this was during the summer. I didn't know much about what was planned for the party, but when I got there, I was pleasantly surprised. Tony's parents had done a good job of setting everything up. I remember they had video games inside of the house and lots of snacks inside as well. Then, in the backyard and front yard, they had activities like bags and mini golf and some other stuff. So after getting there, we played some games and eventually had pizza and cake. Then, when it got a little bit later, everyone kind of spread out. Some people were playing video games inside, and others went out to the yard. I remember that Tony was inside, but I went out into the front yard with 2 or 3 other kids. We were hanging out there, and it was beginning to get dark. I don't remember exactly what we were doing, but I remember that I was looking out into the street, and I noticed this clown. Well, it was a man dressed up as a clown. I'm not sure where he had come from, but he was walking down the side of the street out front. We soon noticed that he was walking in our direction. We figured that Tony's parents must have hired the clown. It was probably a funny joke, because Tony's parents were funny people. So this clown guy walked right up to the front yard. He then approached me and the other kids that were there. Then he waved at us without saying anything. We didn't really know what to do. The clown guy started making hand signals and stuff, and then he walked up and grabbed one of my friend's arms. He started to walk away with him before my friend pulled himself away. The clown then turned around and took a few steps towards us. We all began to move back and away from him. That's when the clown started to run in our direction. I remember that we all just took off running and went back inside the house. We still thought it was probably a joke, but it seemed kind of strange. The clown did not follow us inside. But after getting in the house, we told Tony, who told his parents. Tony's parents said that they did not hire a clown. They were not expecting anybody in a clown costume. We got the creeps when we heard that. So some random guy dressed as a clown had just approached us and acted all weird. We all went outside to look, but did not see him. Tony's parents then called the police. They made everybody stay inside for the rest of the night. We all went to the windows and looked out of them. I remember like a couple minutes later, we saw the clown jogging down the street. When he passed by the house, he turned and did a little wave towards us. Then he was quickly out of sight. The police got there maybe 5 to 10 minutes later. The clown was no longer in the area though. Not long after, everyone's parents came and picked them up, so I left. We never found out who the clown guy was or what he was doing. This is something that took place when I turned 18 years old. For a little background, I'm a female. It was the summer, and I had recently graduated from high school. So at around my birthday on one Saturday, my parents had a birthday/graduation party for me. It was at our house, and quite a few people showed up. We had food catered, and the party was mostly in the backyard. First, lots of family came by, and then many of my friends started showing up as well. The party lasted for several hours, and everything was going well. But towards the end, that sort of changed. It was probably like 5-something p.m. Many people had left, and just a few family members were still there. I was sitting in the backyard with everyone, but I got up to go get something to drink. In our backyard, it's mostly all fenced in, and not that large. At the back side of it, there's a shed, and my dad has an old fridge in there with some drinks in it. I walked over there, and when I got inside of the shed, all of a sudden, I heard somebody else walking in. I looked up, and this man was standing there who I did not recognize. I just remember that he had sort of longer hair and was about average height. When he approached me, he said hi in a friendly way. The man then said happy birthday to me, and I could see that he was holding a wrapped gift in his hand. I was confused, and the man then told me that he was my dad's friend. I sort of believed him, because how else would this guy be here? Maybe he had just gotten there and was also going to get a drink. It just seemed really strange that he would show up if he had never seen me before. We had a brief conversation, and the man was asking me how I was doing and stuff. He then handed me the gift that he had got for me. I said thanks, and then I said that I was going to go back over to my family. I thought that the man would follow me back over. At first, he left the shed behind me. The angle from the entrance of the shed is not visible from where everyone else was. So after leaving, the man went to the left instead of going to the right, and he went behind the small area between the shed and the back fence. There's about 3 or 4 feet until the fence that separates the backyard from the alleyway behind our house. I thought it was really strange that he was going back there, and I didn't know why, but I didn't question him. Instead, I just walked back over to the rest of my family and friends where I had been before. I remember that I went over to my dad and I asked him if one of his friends was going to be there who I didn't know. He said no, and I then told him about the guy. My dad seemed just as confused as I was, and we went back over to look for the guy, but he was completely gone and must have left. That made the whole thing seem pretty creepy. I was still holding the gift that he gave me, and I decided to open it up. When I did, I saw that it was a framed photo. The picture was photoshopped of me and the man standing together. It was the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. And in the photo, the guy was wearing sunglasses, so it was harder to tell his exact identity. My parents and I were so confused by the whole thing. We tried to figure out who this guy could possibly be, but had no luck. I never ended up finding out who the man was. I'm just glad that I haven't seen him since. I'm going to tell you a story that still makes me angry to this day, even though it happened back when I was a kid. This was when I was about 12 years old or so. I went to the local school and was a shy kid, but I did have several friends. I remember there was this one kid at my school named Eric. We had some mutual friends and certainly knew who each other were, but I wouldn't say we were friends and we never really hung out. I didn't know a whole lot about Eric, but we had a class together and sat sort of near each other, so I would often hear him talking to other people, and when I was talking with my friends, he would sometimes stop by and talk with our group. I remember one of my friends said that he got invited to Eric's birthday party that weekend. Then, to my surprise, the next day Eric invited me to his party. He told me his address and the time and said to bring a present for him. He wrote that information on a post-it note, I remember, and then gave it to me. I felt good for being invited to his party. As a shy kid, I did not get invited to a whole lot of birthday parties. Eric was not really known as that cool or popular, but he certainly had a lot more friends than I did, and I thought well of him. I hadn't known that he considered me to be a good enough friend to invite to his party. So when Friday came, Eric's party was that night. I had gone out with my mom the previous day and got Eric a good present. During the school day, the one of my friends who was also invited told me that he wasn't going. I guess he had to go to his sister's recital or something. Anyways, that made me more nervous to go to Eric's party because I would no longer really know anybody else there that well. So that night, my mom drove me to Eric's house. It was going to be a sleepover, and she said that she would pick me up the next morning. I was dropped off right on time, and then I walked up to the house. Then I knocked on the door. After a moment or two, Eric himself opened up the door. There was another kid with him who I did not recognize. He invited me inside, and I heard some other kids in another room, which sounded like it was at the other end of the house. Eric told me to follow him, and then he led me into the kitchen, which was at the back side of the house. Another kid then walked over from someplace else. Now it was Eric, me, and 2 other kids. Everyone else was still in some other room. There was a kitchen table with a bunch of presents on it. Eric told me to leave the present there, and I did. Then he told me to follow him. I thought he was going back to where everybody else was, but instead, he led me to the back door that was also in the kitchen. This led to the backyard. He told me to go outside, and I didn't know why, but I did. As soon as I was out the door, he slammed the door shut behind me and started laughing. His friends started laughing too. I thought that he was joking at first. I went back to the door and expected him to let me back inside, but then I heard him locking the door. He then said something like, "Later, loser." Then he covered the window to the door and walked away laughing. At first, I didn't know if it was still a joke or what, but after standing outside for probably 5 minutes, I realized that it was no joke and he was not coming back. Then I felt really bad. I was too embarrassed to go knock on a door and try to get back inside. I didn't even want to anyways. I just wanted to go home, but I didn't have a cell phone back then. My mom wouldn't think to go back until the next morning. I was trying to figure out what to do. I ended up walking back into the street. I walked a ways down, and eventually I ended up going to a random person's house. I knocked on the door and luckily they answered. Then I asked to use a phone to call my parents, and I was able to. My mom then came to pick me up. When we got home, she was able to find out the number of Eric's mom, and she called her. I remember that Eric's mom claimed she had no idea that I was even invited. She drove Eric to our house later the next day and made him apologize to me in person as well as give the present back. It didn't really make me feel that much better though. I had been humiliated. After that, I never talked to Eric again. I saw him around in school the next year or two, but luckily, we did not end up going to the same high school. This happened 20 years ago. My name is Liz, and when I was turning 14 years old, I had a birthday party with some friends. It was not a huge party. It was just me and my 4 closest friends from school. The 5 of us went to my house after school on Friday, and we were going to have a sleepover. We got pizza and just hung out and had a good time. We stayed up late in my room playing games and stuff. Finally, when it was pretty late, we got tired and were going to go to sleep. We were all sleeping in my bedroom because it was pretty large and nice. I was in my bed, and all my friends had sleeping bags and had plenty of space. So I remembered that it was probably like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm not sure if any of us were asleep yet. I know that I wasn't. However, I was laying in bed with my eyes closed, trying to fall asleep. The next thing I knew, I heard a knock at my bedroom window from the outside. There was no mistaking it, and there were several somewhat loud knocks at the window. I sat up in bed and looked to the window. There were shades mostly covering it, so I couldn't really see anything. I whispered to the room, asking if anybody else had heard that. Several of my friends spoke up, saying that they had. The knocking was not going on anymore, so I decided to get up and look out of the window. I walked over to it and then lifted up the shades. When I did, I saw this man standing there. I instantly backed away from the window and told everybody that I saw a guy. A few of them had also briefly seen him. We all then ran out of the room. We headed towards the living room, and everybody else in the house was asleep by then. I remember that we looked out the living room window outside but didn't see the guy anymore. We talked amongst ourselves and then went around checking several different windows. After not seeing or hearing anything unusual or strange, we decided to go back into my bedroom. We figured whoever it was had left and would not be back, and were then going to attempt to go to sleep again. But before doing so, I checked out of my bedroom window one last time. When I did, I saw the man coming out from behind a tree in the front yard. He instantly began walking in my direction. I moved away from the window and we all left the room again. This time, we called the police. We waited away from windows towards the center of the house for them to come. I also woke everybody else up. When the police got there, the man was gone and nowhere in sight. Luckily after that, he didn't return. This remains one of the scariest moments of my life. This is something that happened back in college. I'm a female, and I went to one of my best friends from college's house for her birthday. She lived in a pretty standard college house with a few roommates. I was friends with all of them, and I lived in an apartment close by. So for her birthday, she invited several friends over. We went to her house in the early evening and hung out for a while. It sort of turned into a party by nighttime with a lot of other people there. A bunch of us went out to some nearby bars in the area sometime around 9 or 10 o'clock. We walked because they weren't that far away, and the weather was pretty good. So after going to 2 or 3 places and being out for several hours, I remembered that we decided to head back. Some people were staying out for longer, and others had already left. So when we walked back, it It was just my friend and I. We were going down the sidewalk, and my friend said that she thought the guy behind us was following. I looked back and saw a man who I did not recognize. He seemed to be around our age, maybe a little older, was tall and thin. He was walking back about 40 feet from us, so he was not that close. My friend said that she saw him staring at her in the bar a few times. I really hadn't noticed, but I took her word for it. We continued to walk back and hoped that the man would turn off someplace. But the farther we walked, the man was still there. It got more concerning when we turned a few times and the man turned as well. These streets were much quieter, so it felt a lot more suspicious now. When we were approaching the street that my friend lived on, we decided to try and lose the guy. We took a right instead of going straight. Then we quickly went down an alleyway. For a moment, it seemed really sketchy, but we were able to cut between two houses and go to the next street over. This did not allow the man to see exactly where we were going. We walked down that street and then went over another block. We walked a little ways further before heading back to where we originally were. For the rest of the walk back, we did not see the guy. We were able to safely make it back to my friend's house. When we arrived, there were quite a few people at her place, and it was basically a party. Most of the people were just friends though, and there really weren't any random people there. I would say there was about 20 people, most of them in the living room and dining room area. We hung out with some people downstairs for a while. However, I remember looking over into the living room at one point and seeing the same guy who had been following us. He was just standing in the corner, kind of near the door. He was looking at his phone mostly and was not really talking to anyone. I showed my friend, and we were both very creeped out. I remember that I asked several friends if they knew who he was, and nobody did. We ended up telling a couple of our guy friends that were there who happened to play on the school football team. They said they would get the guy to leave, and did exactly that. They basically kicked him out of the house, and then he was gone. He did not come back for the rest of the night. I'm not sure exactly how he knew to go to the house, because we thought we had lost him from following us. The only thing I can think of is maybe he waited behind a tree or bush or something, or maybe he had already knew where my friend lived. It's pretty creepy to think about. I'm not aware of her ever seeing the guy again though.
This happened 13 years ago on my 10th birthday. At the time, I shared a bedroom with my older sister, who was 16 at the time. Our room had 2 full-size metal frame beds, and we had lost the covering on the bottom of the legs. I was excited to have a big birthday party, so I woke up early to inflate all my balloons, and I scattered them all over our bedroom floor. The day became cold and rainy though, so my parents decided to cancel my birthday party. 10-year-old me was so angry. My parents suggested having a nice dinner at home and watching movies. I have always been the slowest eater in the family, so while I finished my dinner, they began the movie. My sister got into an argument with my mom and stormed off to the bathroom upstairs. I can't recall what it was about since I was enjoying my food. All I heard was my mom yelling at my sister in Spanish, saying a phrase that basically means the devil is going to see you because of how you are behaving. When I finished, I decided it was time to sleep since I was still mad that my parents canceled my party. I went to my room and got comfy in my bed, while my sister wasn't in the room yet as she was still in the bathroom. As I drifted off to sleep, I heard a balloon pop. It woke me up, but I didn't place much thought into it. Then I heard pop, 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 pop. All my balloons were popping. My bed began to shift slowly forward, and then really hard back to the wall. I was screaming my head off, calling for my mom. I was too scared to jump off and run to the door. I screamed for what seemed like forever until finally my mom ran into the room and turned on the lights. I could see all the balloons that were popped were only around my bed. I told her exactly what happened, and she told me to sleep in her room. The next morning, my sister ran into my parents' room and woke me up yelling at me. She was yelling and asked why I would leave her alone in our room after she told me that she was scared. I yelled back at her that I told her I slept the whole night with Mom and Dad. My mom confirmed to her that she took me out of the room and my sister was not there. My sister's face got white, and then she told us what happened to her. After she got out of the bathroom, she went into our room, and she got in bed and fell asleep. She woke up at 3:30 a.m. and couldn't move. She could hear footsteps heading to our room door. The door opened, and there was a big tall shadow of what seemed like a man. It seemed to be our dad, and he had the habit of checking on us at night, but the strange thing was he wouldn't do it that late at night, and the shadow never flicked on the light, it just stood there. She began to hear a weird noise, like a bull getting ready to charge from my window, and getting closer and closer to her ear until she could feel warm breath on her ear. She began to recite a prayer in her head until she could finally move. She mustered up the courage to jump off the bed and flick on the light, which was next to the doorway and the figure. When the light came on, the figure was gone, and she couldn't hear the noise anymore. She looked at my bed, and there was something that appeared to be me. She described it as looking exactly like me with a ponytail. My sister told the thing, which she thought was me, that she had just experienced something and that she was scared and that she wanted to go to my parents' room. The thing told her, "Don't worry, just go back to sleep." And after my sister questioned it, asking if I was sure, it said, "Just go back to bed." My sister was surprised since I scare easily, but then went back to her bed. She couldn't take it and woke up at 5 a.m. to go to my parents' room. She looked at my bed and got furious because I seemed to be gone. That's when she ran into my parents' room to wake me up. We exchanged stories and we all went back to the room. You can still see the markings on the wood floor from my bed being dragged. That night scared my sister and I for months, and it was the most memorable birthday I had as a kid. This story takes place back in the 2000s. I was a little girl celebrating my friend's birthday. She always had a Halloween party to celebrate because that's when her birthday happened to be. She always talked about how her basement felt weird and she didn't like staying down there alone. Well, having 10 or so 10-year-old girls sleep over on Halloween night isn't exactly bedroom material, so her mom and grandma set us up in the basement. There we played a bunch of games, and eventually, when some of us started to get tired, we brought out the Ouija board. A few of our friends were spooked, so they didn't want to participate. We asked innocent questions like kids usually do, such as who was the birthday girl going to marry, how old were we going to be when we had kids, and stuff like that. I remember I asked a question about myself, and the board replied, dead, which was weird. Some of the girls got spooked even more by that. Finally, a girl screamed and said that she saw something behind me in the mirror. We stopped using the board after that. For a few hours, 3 of us, including the birthday girl and I, couldn't sleep. We weren't sure if the board was real or not, so we decided we'd try one more time while everyone else was asleep, thinking that since they didn't want to play, it'd be better that way also. It was close to 3 a.m., which we had heard was the witching hour. Remember here that we were about 10 or 11 years old, dumb, and had no idea what we were doing or who we were talking to. We asked the board if it could do something for us. We said at 3:15 a.m. to have the girl who saw something in the mirror earlier wake up and say something to us. It was over 15 years ago now, so I don't remember what we asked the girl to say. All I know is we asked her to look at the mirror and say it. 3:15 a.m. was about 20 minutes or so from when we asked the question. I remember us saying goodbye to the board and putting it away. The 3 of us were talking about how impossible our ask was when 3:15 a.m. hit. We knew it hit that time because her basement had a big grandfather clock that didn't ring anymore, but the clock function still worked. We were waiting, and right before the time changed to 3:16 a.m., it happened. The girl shot straight up out of her blankets and looked straight at the mirror with her eyes closed. She whispered what we asked her to say, then dropped to her pillow like nothing ever happened. We all just looked at each other, frozen. None of the other girls that were sleeping stirred. We were so freaked out that we didn't sleep until the sun came up. We got 3 hours of sleep tops that night. That was my first ever Ouija board experience, and it changed the way I viewed spirits forever. I still think about it and feel guilty that I basically asked for one of my friends to be possessed. Like I said, we were dumb kids. Even though it was a very scary birthday party experience, it at least taught us a lesson not to do dumb stuff like that. This happened years ago before my dad switched career paths when I was about 6 or 7 years old. He used to manage a small-time band that played at family events like birthday parties, weddings, and that kind of stuff. This one time, it was a family event birthday party. I don't remember whose, but that it was someone my parents knew. It was at a house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy. Most of the adults were inside drinking and talking at this point. The band had finished playing outside. There was a bounce house set up in the backyard for the kids, but when I went in, no one else was around. I was bored and had nothing better to do. A few minutes later, a kid came in who looked younger than me. Right behind him, a man who seemed like his father appeared, but something about it was off. They didn't come through the house like everyone else. I saw the kid go over to the side gate and unlock it from inside to let his dad inside. At the time, I didn't think much of it because I was a kid. I just assumed maybe the kid's dad was late and didn't want to go through the front. The dad didn't say anything. He just walked behind the bounce house and stood where he could see inside through the mesh window, where he then pulled out his phone. The kid walked in the bounce house and looked at me and then looked at his dad. The dad nodded. Suddenly, the kid ran at me and tackled me hard. I didn't even have time to react. He pushed my face into the floor with one hand and started pulling at my pants with the other. His dad was filming. I don't know what exactly happened, but something kicked in. I got one arm free and swung back as hard as I could. I hit him in the face and he fell off me. My pants had been pulled down a bit, but my underwear was still on normal. I yanked my pants up and bolted out of the bounce house, straight through the back door and into the house where all the adults were. I didn't say anything. I couldn't really. I just stood there shaking. A few minutes later, I looked outside and saw the gate wide open. They were gone. I never saw either of them again. I didn't tell my parents that night. I don't know why. Maybe I just didn't know how. Years passed before I thought about it again. But last year, it came back to my memory, and I wonder how many other kids did the father-son duo try that tactic on. I'm glad I was able to fight the kid off me. I'd never fought anyone like that before, but I guess I had it in me all along. As a teen, I was a die-hard theater kid. It was fall, and I was in a local community theater production a few cities away. I distinctly kept two groups of friends. There were my school friends and my theater friends. This was because my theater friends were majority religious, homeschooled, and sheltered kids who did theater to socialize. None of them went to school with me, and they lived in adjacent areas and traveled as I did to do community theater in this nearby city. To meet in the middle and hang out with my theater friends, my mom suggested that we have my birthday party with my theater friends after rehearsal. That way they didn't have to travel any extra. I suggested that we have a karaoke party because I loved my karaoke machine, and I also innocently believed that any place that hosted karaoke nights would surely be welcoming to 15 teenagers singing show tunes. My mom, the chaperone of the century, found a seedy dive bar in the area that started karaoke early in the evening and served bar food. The night of my party, my friends and I obliviously bustled into this dive bar with my mom leading the pack. She ordered us a bunch of onion rings and fries, pushed some tables together, and my group of friends and I went about our business, hogging the songbook singing karaoke. At one point, I looked around. This bar must have been dead before we came in, because only a handful of people besides us were in the bar. There were a group of Marines, no doubt from the nearby military base. They were two older dudes who looked like regulars. Then in the only occupied booth in the corner, there was a person sitting alone, and something about him seemed strange. At first, I thought my suspicion was internalized judgment, because this person was a man in his 60s or 70s, and he was dressed in women's clothing. I'm unsure what he identified as, but for the story, I'm calling him a man. He was wearing black heels and pantyhose, a skirt and a jacket combo, a bob wig, pink lipstick, bright blush, and sunglasses. He was drinking dark liquor with an unsteady hand. As we figured out our songs and settled in, my friend's eyes wandered around the room as well. My most sheltered friend Holly whispered to me asking why that man was dressed the way he was. I patiently explained what little I knew about trans people and cross-dressing, and besides my friend making obvious glances in his general direction, the subject was dropped. But shortly after we all sang a few songs, our streak of songs in a row was broken to welcome Carl up to the stage, the person from the booth in the corner. I remember looking at him making the short walk to the karaoke stage and thinking that I had never seen someone so stressed out in my life. His body was tense, knees locked, and though the eyes were covered by sunglasses, it was clear that his gaze was fixed far off. The intro music started to play for his song, and he started offbeat far behind the music with the breathiest, shakiest voice. He didn't look at the screen with the lyrics once and missed many words. Then he would realize he messed up and sigh into the microphone or curse to himself, only to return to the chorus singing in lagged and shaky breaths. His anxiety was amped up as the song went by, and the tension spread throughout the room. It was obvious that watching him made everybody increasingly uncomfortable, as it made him uncomfortable as well. I was trying my best to smile and encourage my friends to clap along. Suddenly, mid-song, Carl began whispering the lyrics very quietly with his mouth right on the mic. Then his voice started breaking and he stopped singing. He returned the mic to the stand with the music still playing, wiped tears from his eyes under his sunglasses, and abruptly walked off the stage. He grabbed his black purse from the booth and left the bar in a hurry. It was unsettling, but after the initial feeling passed, we all sort of shrugged and laughed in shared awkwardness, and the party continued. My party was the talk of the theater kids circuit for a few weeks. Going to a real bar with real strangers was all anyone wanted to talk about. 2 weeks went by, and it was now the week before the opening night of our show. We were going to rehearsal and the street behind the theater was blocked off with police tape. My mom was volunteering that night and stuck around the theater during rehearsal. She was outside for a bit and ended up doing some investigating, and we asked a group of homeless locals what was going on down the street. Turns out someone had murdered and dismembered his wife. Neighbors reported a horrific smell, and the police had found parts of her in pans on the stove, which was found on, and her head in the freezer. Turned out that the Carl character we had seen in the dive bar was the one who murdered his wife. Apparently, Carl was his stage name. I'm not sure what his real name was, and he and his wife were well-known characters in the city. His wife had been seen welding knives and running around town in various stages of undress, and Carl was well known for his cross-dressing ways and prowling through the city at night. His mainstay favorite bar was, of course, the dive bar that we had my birthday party at. But the creepiest part was when the police discovered the crime scene. It had been a couple of weeks since the murder, and the body had been dead for a while. It was very possible that 2 weeks earlier we were listening to Carl singing karaoke after he had murdered his wife. Again, maybe he hadn't yet, but that would explain why he looked so broken down and distraught at the dive bar the night of my birthday party. My friend and I had a conjoined birthday party at a water park because our birthdays were so close and we had most of the same friends. The water park was a well-known place, so there was a lot of people there. It was going to be a 2-day weekend thing, with everyone staying in the hotel rooms that the water park resort offered. When we got there, everything was normal. We put our bathing suits on right away and headed down to the water park. We went down a few slides together, and then we were making our way down to the lazy river, and this man came up to us. He asked us if we had seen a girl with a pink bathing suit that looked to be around 6. We said no and left it alone, but me on the other hand freaked out that he lost his kid, so I kept thinking about it. We went to the lazy river and went around a few times, and just before we started getting bored, we decided to go to the hot tub. When we got to the hot tub, the same man that lost his kid was there also, still with no kid. We got in, and the guy was sitting on the complete other side of us. But then I noticed that he started coming closer to us, and eventually sat down next to us. He whispered to us, "Hey, do you want some weed or booze? I can get it for you." None of us really responded other than saying the quiet refusals. I motioned to the rest of my friends that we needed to get out of the hot tub because the guy was being creepy. As we got up and left, he tried to get one of my friends to stay by grabbing her leg. We immediately went to tell the lifeguard, but the lifeguard didn't seem to care, so we ran to tell our parents, and one of my friends turned around and saw him following us. We told our parents, and they called the police because the security at the water park was horrible, and they said that he wouldn't even have to be removed from the park. Us girls tried to go back to our room, but the man still followed us, so our parents flipped the script on him and stood watching him and followed him around everywhere. Us girls were not there anymore at that point, but our parents followed the creep back to his room, and soon after the police showed up. Hours later, we found out that his daughter was in the room the whole time and he had drugged her and she was unconscious, so the ambulance showed up and took her away from him. He was arrested and lost custody of her. I don't know much about the whole story other than that, but he ended up on the news and we got a refund. The water park really didn't do much, and I'm glad that the police were called. Otherwise, his daughter may have been in way worse shape.
This happened when I was about 10. I was having a birthday party at my house. It was the day before my actual birthday, but this worked out better for everybody to be able to come over. I would do stuff with just my family on my actual birthday. The party was mostly organized by my parents. They invited some of my aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and of course, some of my good friends. It was a pretty big deal, and my family is really close and also big. Our house was not all that big though, but luckily it was summertime and we could have the party in our backyard as well. I remember that we set up some tables and chairs in the backyard and got a bunch of food. People started coming over in the early afternoon. I always had a great time at the family birthday parties, especially when they were for me, and I remember seeing the pile of my presents getting higher and higher, and I was really excited. In total, there was probably 30 people there. It was a great time, and we were all eating and talking with each other. We had some games in the yard as well, and some neighbors even stopped by. I just remember being really surprised at just how many people showed up. I was really busy talking with everyone and things like that. When things got later though, I remember noticing a guy that I didn't recognize there. I figured that he came with somebody like one of my family members, but I never really saw him talking to anyone. He was just kind of standing around. I saw him take some food at one point, but not really interact with anyone. But then again, I only noticed him maybe 3 different times. Like I said, for the most part, I was really busy. I remember that the guy was kind of skinny and wearing a tan shirt and had short hair and a kind of goatee. The party went on into the night, but that's when everyone started to leave. I'm not sure where the guy went, but by the time people were leaving and I was saying goodbye, I never noticed him. I didn't notice him leaving at all either. He must have left before that. After the party, I helped put everything away and then hung out and tried out some of the gifts that I got. Then I headed to bed because I was going to do stuff with my parents and brother the next day. I really don't know what time I went to bed, but I do know that I woke up in the middle of the night. When I did, I remember I turned over to my other side and tried to fall back asleep, but that's when I thought I heard a noise. As a kid, I was scared of any noise that I heard when I was trying to sleep. Sometimes it would be nothing, or other times there would be a logical explanation, but either way, I would be scared. I had a nightlight in the corner of my bedroom, but aside from that, it was very dark. I looked around my room, and everything seemed fine. Then I saw something move. I was sure of it. It was my closet door, and it was in the opposite corner of my room. The door slowly opened, and I saw that there was a man inside of it. I couldn't believe my eyes at first. I kept looking, and my eyes adjusted more to the darkness. It was the same guy from the party who I didn't know. It appeared as though he was looking at me. Then I saw the door slowly closing. It was extremely slow, and I barely heard anything at all. Once it shut, I wondered if I had been imagining things, but I knew that I hadn't, and that this was real. I needed to get out of my bedroom, but I was afraid that if I got up, the man would chase after me or something. I laid there in bed looking around for a few minutes. Then I decided to go for it. I sat up as quietly as possible. Then I made a run for it and got out of my bed and ran for my door. I kind of had to run past the closet door, and I was terrified that it would open. And just as I was passing by, I saw it start to move again. That made me go even faster than I already was. I made it out of my bedroom and ran for my parents' room. When I got there, I swung the door open and closed it behind me. My parents woke up, and I remember them asking me what on earth was going on. Right as I was starting to tell them, I heard a noise coming from the other side of the house. I remember my dad saying, "What is that?" We then heard the front door to our house opening and closing. We all went out to investigate and determined that the man had left. I was really happy that he was gone. He must have snuck in the house at some point during the party. The doors were unlocked for the people to use the bathroom. I can't believe that he was hiding in there. I'm also really glad that I woke up when I did. This is the story of a birthday party that I went to when I was in college. I lived in a college house with 2 roommates a few blocks away from campus. The college that I went to was pretty big and had many other students that attended it. It was my friend Zoe's birthday, and she invited me and a few other people over to her house that night. The party was not that huge of a deal, but a pretty decent number of people ended up showing up. When the time came, I was able to walk to Zoe's house for the party. Her house was kind of similar to the one that I lived in, but a little bit larger. It was only a few blocks away too, and only took maybe 10 minutes for me to walk there. I got there at probably about 7 p.m. and hung out with Zoe and her friends there. I stayed at the party for several hours. I did have class the next morning though, so I decided not to stay up too late. At about 11 p.m., I decided to go home and go to bed. There were still a decent amount of other people there, probably at least 15. I said bye to everyone and then left the house to walk back to mine. I was the only person from my house to go to the party, so I would be walking back alone. I did this many different times. The street did not have a sidewalk, so I would just have to walk on the side of it, but I didn't really mind. They were usually really quiet and not many cars drove down it. The first few minutes of the walk were fine, but I soon realized that I was being followed. I heard footsteps behind me that seemed to come out of nowhere. I looked back and saw a man who I didn't recognize. He looked as suspicious as could be. He was wearing a large jacket with the hood up, nearly covering all of his face. It wasn't even that cold outside. He trailed me by about 50 feet. The streets were not well lit at all either, and I got a little bit nervous. It seemed quite obvious that he was following me, but I guessed maybe he wasn't. I turned at the next block to test it out, and he did the same. I had only a few more blocks to go, and I just wanted to make it back home at that point. When I walked for a few more minutes, the guy stayed at the same following distance, but when we got to the next street, he was suddenly approaching me fast. I knew this was bad news. I was still a ways away from my house. The only thing that I could think to do was to start running. It was late and nobody else was out at this hour. The guy behind me started running after me as I did. When I was running, he didn't really seem to gain on me anymore. After I made it a ways, I looked back again and I didn't see the guy. This made me feel a lot better and I started walking again. I was much closer to my house now, but I still looked back several more times to make sure that I couldn't see the guy. Luckily, I didn't. I walked the rest of the way home and got back. After I got inside, I closed the door and locked it. Things were very quiet. My roommates were asleep already, and all of the lights inside the house were off. I started walking up the stairs to go to bed, but when I was about halfway up, I heard somebody trying to open our front door. I stopped where I was and listened. It happened again. Then I walked back down the stairs, and I looked out the window. That's when I saw the same guy. He was now walking around to the side of our house. I ran all the way back upstairs to my bedroom. I closed my bedroom door, locked it, and made sure that my windows were covered. Then I just went to sleep. I didn't call the police or anything. When I got up the next morning, everything seemed fine. I never saw that guy again after that. When I was a kid, I went to a lot of friends' birthday parties over the years. One memory in particular stands out though. I was 15 at the time, and I was going to a birthday slumber party for my friend Jenna. There were 5 of us in total at Jenna's house. I remember that we hung out in the backyard a lot earlier when it was light out. Jenna's house was sort of big, and they had a back door in the basement that led out to the patio. We hung out there because the weather was really nice, and when it got dark out, we all kind of moved into the basement. We stayed there for the rest of the night. Things got pretty late, and eventually we all got tired. I'm not sure what time it was that we fell asleep, but it was probably well after midnight when the lights went out. There were a couple of couches down there, but not big enough for all of us, so several of us brought sleeping bags. I was one of the people with a sleeping bag, and I got inside of it and fell asleep relatively quickly, but I didn't stay asleep for very long. I know that I woke up and it was still dark outside. I didn't know exactly how long I had been asleep, but not very long at all. I looked around as I laid there. When I did, I happened to glance over towards the sliding glass door leading out to the patio. As soon as I did, I saw a man walking right up to it. This was maybe 20 feet away from me. I looked over to my friends, and nobody else was awake. Then I looked back to the guy. He walked right up to the door, and then he just opened it. I realized that none of us had remembered to lock the door. As it slid open very slowly, I started to panic. I pretended to be asleep, and I watched the man very slowly move inside after he had opened the door. He was being very careful not to make any noise, it seemed. He slowly took a step or two inside, and then stood there looking around. I had my eyes just barely open so that I could see what was going on. It was still pretty dark in there. Really, the only light was coming from the doorway where the man had walked in, and the windows nearby. As the guy was standing there, suddenly there was a noise. It came from my phone, which sat on the ground next to me. It was the sound of me getting a notification. The sound was not that loud, but things were so quiet that it came across as much louder. I know that the guy heard it. When he did, he quietly, but very quickly, darted back out the door which he had left open. He then seemed to hide around the corner of it. In that moment, I'm not sure what got into me. I just felt like I had to do something. I got up as fast as I could and sprinted for the back sliding door. As soon as I reached it, I slammed it shut and locked the door immediately. As I was locking it, I saw the man coming back into view. It was really scary, and he actually tried opening the door, but I had gotten it locked just in time. Then the man turned and ran away. I went back over to my friends and woke them all up. The guy was gone by then, but we ended up calling the police to report him. I really don't know what he was planning to do, but I'm glad that I woke up when I did and was able to lock the door. This happened when I was celebrating my quinceañera. It wasn't going to be a huge party since I didn't really want one, but since I'm the only girl in my family, my parents felt it was necessary to throw me a party. It was being held at a public park in the middle of our town where many quinceañeras and celebrations were held. So when you were having a celebration, everybody knew what it was, who you were, and regardless of whether they were invited or not, they would attend it just to drink booze and dance. Everything was going well the day of my party. I had a special father-daughter dance, and all my friends came to support me, and it was one of my favorite memories. There was a rodeo happening that same day as well, so not everybody who was invited came up until about 9 or 10 p.m. That's when those who weren't invited came to just drink or watch the party. 11 p.m. rolled around, and pretty much all my friends and the guests had left, except those who were helping clean up. It was cold out, so not many offered to help. The only people who really stayed were a group of guys who I had never seen before in my life. There had to be about 5 of them, all with booze in their hands, wearing baseball caps and dressed in black. They definitely didn't look like they came from the rodeo, nor from my party. They ranged in age from early 20s to late 40s. I didn't exactly notice them until I sat down on one of the benches to talk to a family friend, and I noticed them just standing there, staring at me. Now, keep in mind, I'm a 15-year-old girl, skinny and short with a big dress on, so I could have easily been overpowered by any of these guys, and I knew that, so I became paranoid very quickly. At first, I didn't think much of it, and figured they must be looking at the decorations or just my dress since I did have a quite flamboyant dress on. Then, one of the guys, the youngest looking guy, started walking up to me and handed me a $100 bill. He said absolutely nothing, didn't even smile, which made everything even more peculiar since people usually say, "Congratulations," or "I love your dress." But all this guy did was widen his eyes at me when he came closer. I took the money and said, "Thank you so much," and then I put it in the box I had where I put all the money that I got. Then my family friend had to leave, and I was left alone with all these men standing probably 5 feet in front of me, all huddled up in a group just intensely staring at me. I quickly became extremely uncomfortable, but I didn't know what to do. They weren't even trying to be discreet about it. They all had their eyes wide open, just staring at me. I don't know if they were drunk or high or just plain stupid, but whatever it was, they definitely didn't seem like they had good intentions. When I would make eye contact with them, I'd smile since I was trying to be polite. I was always taught to be friendly to guests. When I would look away though, they would make noises at me, like whistle at me, or noises you'd make to call an animal's attention. They started getting closer and whispering to each other, but thanks to some miracle, my older brothers came over to ask me if I wanted to leave with them since they were going back home. I immediately said yes, and told them about the creepy guys that were standing there staring at me. They told me that I should have said something as soon as I got uncomfortable, and they were right, but I was frozen since I didn't know what to do or think. When I tried to point them out to my brothers, they were already gone. Unfortunately, the story doesn't necessarily end there. A couple of weeks go by, and I ended up getting a Facebook friend request. At this point, I had already forgotten about the incident until I looked at the profile picture of the friend request, and I recognized the guy in the picture as one of the creeps. I was terrified and immediately went to show my brothers. One of them texted the account, telling them to stay away from me, and I reported and blocked the account. I ended up creating a whole new different Facebook account under a different name. I just can't fathom what could have happened if I had been completely alone with those guys for any longer, or if they had found more than just my Facebook account.
A couple of years back when I was in college, I lived in a house during the school year with 2 other guys named Jake and Ryan. We went to a pretty big university, and between the 3 of us, we had a decent amount of friends. Jake's birthday happened to fall on a weekend, and at our house, we threw him a birthday party. Pretty much a bunch of our friends came over, and we hung out, played some games, and drank. Over time, more and more people came over, and before long, our house was packed. I didn't even recognize some of the people that were coming over, but I figured at least one of the guys knew them. It was a pretty fun time, but eventually it got really late, and about 2 o'clock in the morning or so, people started to leave. Most of the people who I didn't really know left first, and then some of our closer friends stayed longer. However, there was still this one guy that was there who I didn't recognize at all. When there was maybe 10 of us left or so, I asked Jake if he knew who the guy was. Jake shook his head and said no. A couple of minutes later, the guy that I recognized left, and so did a few more of my friends, leaving it with just a few of us still there. But about 2 or 3 minutes later, there was a knock at our front door. I walked over and opened it to see the guy who I didn't know who had been at our party earlier. He asked me if it was my car that was out in the alley behind our house. I said yes. We had a narrow alleyway behind our house with a very small driveway and garage connected to it. My car was the only one that would fit in the alley, and my roommates would park on the street. The guy explained to me that it looked like someone was trying to break into my car, and he said he saw this as he was leaving. I went outside with the man, and we walked rather quickly out to where my car was. When we got there, though, I didn't see anyone, and we guessed whoever was there had left.
The guy led me around to the passenger side and said that's where he saw him. I examined the door, and as I did, I suddenly saw a flash of headlights entering the alley. It was so sudden that I couldn't help but look over, and as soon as I did, I felt myself get shoved from behind, and I fell right into the middle of the alleyway. As I was on the ground, I saw the headlights coming straight for me at a very fast pace. I rolled my body as quickly as I could to the other side of the alley, which is where my momentum was taking me. I was just barely able to make it to the other side before the speeding car ran me over. It was literally within 3 or 4 feet of hitting me. I then saw the man who had led me out there, and he was looking right at me with a very surprised look on his face. I realized that he was the one who had shoved me, and at the same time, I heard the car come to a screeching stop. I got up as fast as I could and jumped the fence that separated the alley from other people's backyards who lived behind us. From there, I ran away as fast as I could and hid in one of my neighbor's bushes. I could hear for a time screeching tires as if the car was driving quickly down nearby roads. I called my roommates and told them what had happened. From there, Jake came out and found me and we went back to our house together. Then we called the police. I have no idea who the guy was or how he knew about our party, but what I do know is that I was nearly ran over that night, and I feel lucky to be here today. Many years ago, when I was a little kid, I remember I went to my cousin's house for a birthday party. I was probably about 6 or 7 years old at the time. In my cousin's family, they had 4 kids who are all grown now, and they're all older than me by several years. I don't even remember whose birthday it was on this particular time, but we would occasionally get invited to their parties. This was sometime in the early 2000s, and I always liked to visit their house because they had a PlayStation 2, which was very popular back then. Early on, I think we were just kind of hanging out, and then we had some pizza and cake. I don't remember much of the specific details, but afterwards I went outside. They had a rather large property and had a big field with the woods and even had some chickens that they raised. The chickens lived in a small shed with a chicken coop in it near the entrance of the woods. I know occasionally they had problems with coyotes trying to get at the chickens because of this. I wandered outside with one of my cousins who was going to show me how the chickens were doing. At some point, I guess he must have been called over to do something else because he left. Then it was just me, and I decided to go out and see the chickens by myself anyways. I walked out to the entrance of the woods and into the small shed. Once inside, I looked at all the chickens they had. There were quite a few of them, and some of them looked at me as I went near. Then I heard the sound of someone outside the shed who I assumed was my cousin. After a while, though, he didn't go inside the shed, so I called his name. He didn't answer me, and then after I called him again without a response, I wondered if it was even him who was outside. I began to feel a little scared that there was a large animal outside the shed, like a wolf or a bear or something like that, and I slowly walked out to look. When I did, I didn't see anything, but then I heard noises of movement deeper into the woods. It sounded like something or someone that was rather large. I figured it had to be a deer, but I was a little kid and scared, so I ran away back to the house. I hung out with everyone else for a while, but my curiosity got the better of me about an hour later, and I walked back out to the woods to look at the chickens again. This time, I went straight for the shed where the chickens were and opened the door. As soon as I opened it, though, I saw a man inside who I didn't recognize. I immediately closed the door and ran all the way back to my cousin's house. When I got inside, I told one of my cousins that there was a man in the shed. He didn't really seem to believe me, though, and we both went back out there, but whoever was in the shed was now gone. We went back inside, and nobody else was told about it. However, even after all these years, I know what I saw out there, and I suspect the man was who I had heard in the woods earlier as well. This happened just a few months ago. I have a nice friend group at college that I love to hang out with. There's about 6 or 7 of us that hang out a lot, and we have a few classes together at our university. It was my friend Tyler's birthday, and I was invited to his house as well as a few other people. It wasn't a house party or anything like that, but more of a small gathering for Tyler's birthday. We first hung out at his house, then we went out to dinner. After that, we went back to Tyler's. We all got him a gift or two and had planned for him to open it and maybe play a few games. Tyler lived in a house with 3 other people from our friend group, and it was a 2-story house that was sort of on the older side. When we were back at Tyler's house hanging out in the living room, we heard some noises from upstairs of someone walking around. We all looked at each other kind of creeped out until realizing that one of our friends, Tom, wasn't with us. When we realized that was him, we waited for a couple of minutes, then yelled at Tom to come back downstairs because Tyler was about to open his gifts. He didn't come down though, and eventually I volunteered to go up and get Tom, who I guess couldn't hear us. I went upstairs and first went to the bathroom. The door was open though, and Tom wasn't in there. That was really strange to me because Tom didn't live there, and I didn't know why he would be in one of the guys' bedrooms who did. I saw one of the bedroom doors was open, so I slowly walked inside and looked around. All of the lights were off. I then heard someone whisper my name. It was Tom. I looked around to the direction of the noise. It came from the closet, and I walked over to see Tom hiding inside of it. He waved me over and told me someone else was upstairs who didn't live there. He said he came upstairs to use the bathroom, and as he was leaving to go back down, he saw a guy come through Tyler's bedroom. I told him to come back downstairs, but just as I was saying that, we heard the noise of someone walking down the hallway. We knew it wasn't another one of our friends because we hadn't heard anybody come up the stairs. I ran to hide under the bed, and Tom went back in the closet. We both got as silent as we could. We heard someone walk down the hall to the room that we were in. They entered the room, but then seemed to stop just inside the doorway because I didn't hear any footsteps after that. I thought my heart was going to beat out of my chest in that moment. It was quiet for maybe 10 seconds until I started to hear the noise of someone coming up the staircase. Then I heard whoever was in the room with us seemingly turn around and leave the room and go back into the hallway. I then heard the noise of one of my friends shouting. Tom and I both knew that we had to help, and we got out and ran. For a split second, we saw someone dart into Tyler's room and then shut the door. It was Tyler himself who had come upstairs, and we saw him at the top of the stairway. He yelled he was calling the police, and we saw him with his phone in his hand. After he had called them, they arrived at the house within 5 minutes. We all waited back downstairs in the meantime. When the police got there, they went into Tyler's bedroom, but saw that the window was wide open and the man was gone. Nobody knew who the man was, but there was a tree next to Tyler's bedroom window that I guess the guy climbed up to get in. Tyler's window was also already open a crack, so all the guy had to do was just lift it. After that, we went on with the birthday party as best as we could, but none of us will ever forget it.
This story occurred at my friend's 10th birthday party. It remains to this day one of my creepiest memories. My friend Jake was turning 10 years old and had me and several other kids over to his house. I knew Jake pretty well, and all of us kind of had a friend group. We had all been to his house many times, and it was fun because he had a pretty big yard where we would play sports and stuff. His yard also had a huge woods on it, and his parents were hunters and liked to hunt on his property occasionally. Because of this, they were creating a walking path throughout the woods in his backyard. On this night, once it had gotten dark, we all thought it would be fun and also creepy to go into the woods at night. We all started walking on the paths that his parents had created, but they soon ended, and the paths turned into more of just flattened leaves and twigs as a walkway. It was pretty creepy to be in the woods at night as a 10-year-old, and I'm not gonna lie, I was slightly scared. But we kept walking, and maybe 15 minutes in, I thought that I heard a noise come from the left side of the trail behind us. I asked the guys if they had heard it, but they all said no. We all stopped and listened, but there was no more sounds. We all then kept on walking, but I wanted to know what had made the sound. I knew it was probably just a squirrel or a rabbit, but I was a curious kid, and I wandered off the trail just a little. I heard my friends keep moving, and I planned to catch back up with them when I was done looking around. But then I heard another noise. It was the sound of twigs snapping, but this time it was much louder. It sounded to be less than 20 feet away from me. I slowly walked deeper and deeper into the woods. I had to go around a thick tree, but when I did, I could hear even more noises. They were very loud and got higher as I was getting closer. I looked around and finally looked up. There, I saw a man in a tree about 15 feet above the ground. I could only really make out his head. He was looking directly at me with a completely straight face. Most of his body was behind a branch. I just stood there in shock, not knowing what in the world was going on. Then I saw the man's head quickly disappear behind the branch. But when he did, he seemed to completely vanish. I stood there for another 5 seconds or so, but didn't hear anything at all. After that, all I could think to do was sprint back to my friends. I ran back to the path, and when I got there, I saw my friends walking back towards the direction of me. They could see that I was shaken up and asked me what was wrong. I said that I had seen a man, and we all ran back as fast as we could to Jake's house. His parents ended up going out to the woods, but came back saying they didn't see anything. They did tell us there was no reason why a man should be out there. It remains a scary thing for me to think about, because I know exactly what I saw, but I don't know how to explain it. Every year when I was a kid, I would have my friend John over for my birthday from the time I was about 8 years old until I graduated high school. The same would happen for his birthday every year, except I would go to his house instead of him going to mine. It was never a huge deal, and would usually just be the two of us hanging out. We typically would just do whatever was fun at the time. Some years we went to the mall, other times we go golfing. On this one year, I think John was turning about 12 years old. We went go-kart racing for his birthday. It was a really fun time, and I remember racing over and over again with John and a bunch of other people. We raced probably for an hour, and then went to an arcade area which was connected to the racetracks. And when we saw this really creepy looking guy in the corner, literally just standing there against the wall watching people. I said to John how he looked creepy. The man had a mustache, glasses, and was very skinny. He also had an overall dirty look to him. I'm not sure how old he was, but I'd guess 40s if I had to. We kept playing in the arcade, and the man stayed there for a long time. He gave me a bad feeling, but I wasn't going to let that stop us from having fun. We played some more games, and then saw that the man had left, which was cool, I guess. It was then time to go back to John's house, and we got in his mom's car to go back. As we were on the way back to John's sitting in the back seat, we turned around and noticed that the creepy guy we had seen at the arcade was driving the car directly behind us. At first, John and I thought it was funny, but each turn John's mother would make, the man would make as well. It stopped being a funny coincidence, and we started to get worried. Still, we didn't tell John's mother and kept it between us, and looking back on that, it was probably a mistake. We got back to John's, and the man drove by on the street past his house. We were relieved to see this and went inside. However, about an hour later when we were in John's living room, we noticed the car sitting outside directly in front of his house. We looked to the car, but saw that nobody appeared to be in it. This creeped us out because we feared he would be on the property. We told John's mom the story of what had happened and why we were concerned. She seemed to not believe us at first, but when we showed her the car outside, she seemed to get a little bit concerned. John's dad then came in and we told him all about it. He decided to go out and look around. About 20 minutes later, we heard some yelling coming from outside. John's dad then came in saying he was calling the police. He told us that after seeing nobody in the car, he took a walk around the house and found the man ducked down hiding outside John's bedroom window. When the man saw John's dad, he ran off. The police came and were able to find the man hiding in a woods about a mile away. I remember it was a wild scene with all the cops there. It's really creepy to think that a man followed us all the way home and was outside of John's window. This story happened when it was my friend's birthday. He was turning around 13 years old. It was a normal birthday, just chill and eating pizza. We got bored of the movie we were watching, so we decided to play laser tag at our park
even though it was nighttime. There were only 4 laser guns, and there were 6 of us, so me and my friend, who we'll call Bill, were going to try to scare our friends because we all saw a devil star on the side of a building nearby. We ran towards the back of the park where the building was. But when I got there, I turned and saw a tall, skinny man sitting on one of the benches nearby. The man had to be at least 7 feet tall and was extremely thin. It was strange for anybody to be out here at this time of night, and something about it gave me a bad feeling. As soon as I saw him, I turned back and told my friends. We ran back towards the group and told them about the man. We all looked over in the direction of him. He was sitting there, and eventually sat up straight and looked at us. Then he gave us a slow and creepy wave. We were very scared at this point. He then stood up and out of nowhere ran at us full speed and yelled to run. As the man chased after us, I was running and I could hear him getting closer. He got about 5 feet away from me before I was able to outrun him. We all ran for our lives and made it back to our friend's house. And on the way back, we lost the man sometime. I never knew what his intentions were, but I'm glad we made it back alive. I am a parent of a 7-year-old girl. 2 years ago, on her 5th birthday, a few of her friends came over and I took them to a nearby park. It was a popular destination for kids to play, and one of my daughter's favorites. It was a beautiful Saturday morning, and I sat at a picnic table and watched over all the kids. The park was rather large, and somewhat in the city surrounded by streets, so I had to make sure that the kids stayed in the general area. About 30 minutes in, all of the kids were roughly 50 feet away from me when I saw a van pull up to one of the quieter roads next to some trees. Cars would occasionally drive by or come to the park, so I didn't really think anything of it until I saw a clown step out of the driver's seat. 2 of the kids ran up to me at this time and told me they were hungry, so I went to my bag to get some food. I kept an eye on the clown and saw that he started to walk along the street going farther away from the kids, but as soon as he walked by them, the kids started to notice. He then turned and looked at them and smiled. The clown was fully dressed with big shoes and a wig and everything. He waved at the kids and began to approach them. He seemed like an innocent clown, and the kids gathered around him and talked. I went back to getting food for the other kids that were by me. Once I did, I looked back up, but this time the kids weren't where I had seen them before. I looked around and saw the clown with the 3 kids now standing near his van, and the clown seemed to be motioning for them to follow him. As soon as I saw this, I jumped up and ran over towards them. As I got about 20 feet away, I saw the clown jump into the driver's door of his van and quickly drive away. The kids all looked very confused. I asked them what the clown had said to them, and the kids told me that he had asked them to come and see a pet lizard that he had in his van. I got very creeped out when I heard this, and based off the way the clown quickly drove off, I feel those were not his intentions. I'm glad I was able to step in, but I didn't return to that park with my daughter ever again after that.